Cemeteries are the scariest places in the world. With hundreds of people buried, there are bound to be things that are unnatural. And if there's one thing on earth we can all agree is most likely to be haunted, it's a cemetery. Hundreds of unfulfilled wishes and broken dreams, with an environment full of emotions, these are the places which often plays a very vital part in ghost stories. Not only ghost stories, there are real life experiences and reports which makes it more scary. So from the cemetery of a famous voodoo queen to the final resting place for the bones of Satan's child, these are the top 5 most haunted cemeteries in the world. Among the 3 St. Louis cemeteries, it is the oldest and most famous. It was opened in 1789, replacing the city's oldest St. Peter's Cemetery as the main burial ground when the city was redesigned after a fire in 1788. Paranormal experts have called this as the most haunted cemetery in the world. Some of the most famous and most notorious people rest here, which includes wealthy French pioneer of the sugar industry Etienne de Boer, first mayor of New Orleans Homer Plessy, Barthélemy Lafon, the architect and surveyor who allegedly became one of Jane Lafitte's pirates, and the notoriously cruel slave owner Delphine LaLaurie is also believed to rest here. These are just the few among the 100,000 people who are buried in just this section of land. Interestingly, Hollywood actor Nicolas Cage have also purchased a pyramid-shaped tomb here to be his future final resting place. Among all this, the tomb that tends to attract the most attention is of famous voodoo queen Mary LaVue. People mark 3 X's on their tomb, believing that doing so will cause her to grant them a wish. There have been several reports about visitors seeing transparent figures moving on top of graves, shouting children who disappears as soon as you turn around, and several other types of orbs and apparitions which remains unexplained till date. With this, there is also a documented case of a man, Henry Vignes, who died suddenly and was placed in an unmarked grave, and as a result is said to be seen often. Except the families who own tombs, this cemetery is closed for general public because of the rise in vandalism. But in a controversial move, the authorities now charge tour companies for access. So what do you think? Is it worth a tour? Bachelor's Grove Cemetery is a small abandoned cemetery in Bremen Township, Cook County, Illinois in Chicago's southwest suburbs. It is well known for its haunted reputation and ghost sightings. Now the weirdest part of this cemetery is it's not only home to apparitions of people, apparition of an entire house have been reported by a startling number of people, who can all identify a similar white farmhouse with pillars and a porch swing. The most common of the reported phenomena at the site typically involves floating orbs of light over tombstones and near collision with a phantom vehicle which appears to be moving but disappears within seconds. Besides this, there have been additional reports of supernatural events at the cemetery, which includes a farmer and his plow horse, a 2-headed ghost, a black dog, and one of the most famous paranormal photographs in history, which shows a transparent woman sitting on a tombstone. Though the apparition was not visible when the photograph was taken, but on developing it, everyone was shocked. She was later named the Madonna of Bachelor's Grove. Many paranormal societies and researchers have reported electronic voice phenomena or EVP in the area. Even the Ghost Adventures crew caught unexplained floating lights and EVPs in one of their episodes. With all this, the area is also a well-known dumping ground for victims of organized crime in Chicago, which has added to the gruesome mood surrounding the area. Highgate Cemetery is a place of burial in North London, England, and there are very few cemeteries around the world that could compete with the level of paranormal activity happening behind the Gothic walls of this cemetery. There are approximately 170,000 people buried in around 53,000 graves. People buried here includes notable people like Karl Marx. Highgate Cemetery is a place where all kind of ghost stories are heard. Some of the most reported incidents include a mad old woman with grey hair running between the gravestones in search for the children she is said to have murdered, a man staring into the space and vanishing when approached, and the most popular is of a vampire looking man with bloody red eyes, also known as the Highgate Vampire. According to the legend, the Highgate Vampire is a 7-foot tall phantom that has attacked people since 1960s. This case is so well documented and reported that even the Discovery Networks made a whole show about it. Now it doesn't end here. Several eyewitnesses have also claimed seeing a strange group of men in dark robes who would frequently visit the isolated burial ground in order to conduct their dark rituals in secret. So will Highgate Cemetery find a place in your bucket list? Howard Street Cemetery in Salem is one of the craziest and most haunted places in United States with a rich history of witch hunt. One famous resident of the ground wasn't just buried there, he died there too. Gil's Corey was the only person to die by torture during the witch trials. Corey refused to admit guilt or innocence regarding his use of witchcraft because either way he answered would allow city officials to take his property. So the sheriff made Corey lie down in a hole in the middle of the field and then added stones to a board placed across his chest. More stones were slowly added until Corey was eventually crushed to death 2 days later. It is said that before his death he cried out for more weight as he couldn't bear the unimaginable pain and wanted to die. All these incidents have cursed the land of Salem, and probably because of this, Corey still appears in the cemetery right before any tragedy strikes the town. He was supposedly seen just days before the Great Salem Fire of 1914, which destroyed 1,376 buildings and made over 18,000 people homeless and jobless. There is no shortage of haunted graveyards all around the world, but none of them are quite as legendary as Kansas Stull Cemetery, an infamous doorway to hell with a reputation so big that even Pope himself is said to make his plane fly around it. With legends that involve human sacrifice, occult rituals, and even a yearly visit from the devil himself, Stull has gained an over-the-top reputation that has landed it in countless books, most haunted top 10 lists, and even appearances on famous TV series Supernatural. The infamous gates to hell is actually a destroyed church at the center of the cemetery. Crazy, right? How can a church be a gateway to hell? So according to the legends, Lucifer once used the abandoned, now destroyed church as his own personal doorway to the other dimension. It was in Stull where he would rouse the spirit who had once been buried inside the gates of the most evil cemetery in existence. But he is only able to pass through the gateway twice a year, at midnight on the spring equinox and of course on Halloween. Now there are many theories and speculation about the origin of Stull's evil reputation, but the most widely accepted theory is tied to both a large tree that once stood in the cemetery and an old tombstone inscribed with the word witch. The tree was actually a hanging tree for witches who were put to death by people of the town, and supposedly the grave is the final resting place for the bones of Satan's child, who the legend says was born deformed and was covered in wolf hair. Hundreds of eyewitnesses have claimed that even though the church had been missing its roof since the 1920s, but rain has refused to land inside the building. Visitors would report that the tiny church would stay bone dry no matter what time of year or weather conditions. And it was because of this supernatural attributes that the town finally gathered to tear the church down. It is said that this destruction of the building made the spirits angry, and the hauntings in the graveyard have escalated since then. Out of all the stories that surround Stull, the most famous story associated with the cemetery reportedly happened in 1993 when Pope John Paul II was flying to Colorado for a public appearance. Reportedly, the Pope considered that the ground in Stull Cemetery was unholy, and he forced his private plane to reroute his flight around the graveyard and not above the graveyard, because according to the Pope, even the air above it was tainted by evil. So these are the top 5 most haunted cemeteries in the world. Did you visit any one of them, or at least planning to go to one? Do let me know in the comment section. I hope you enjoyed this video, and do hit that like button. And don't forget to hit that bell icon after subscribing. Thanks for watching, and I will see you on the internet.